My name is Ethan
Stein!
Cole. I'm
Loud
25 years
Holden!
old, and everything I'm
Yonder!
about to tell you actually
Hear
happened
the
to me.
string!
3 weeks ago, a woman stood up in the middle of my restaurant, pointed her finger at me, and screamed so loud the whole room went silent. "That's him!" she shouted. "That's the boy who abandoned this family!" Forks stopped halfway to mouths. 100 strangers turned to look at me. And the woman screaming that I abandoned my family was my own mother. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that she was standing inside a building I own. 8 years ago, this same family threw me out into the rain with a garbage bag of clothes. I was 17, and I hadn't done the thing they punished me for. So before you judge me for what happened next, stay with me until the very end. Because this story turns in ways you will not see coming. I promise you that. And at the very end, you tell me in the comments, who was the real thief in this family? To understand tonight, you have to go back to the coldest night of my life. Let me take you there. It was a Tuesday in November when my stepfather, Roger, opened the front door and told me to get out. Not tomorrow, not in the morning, right then, in the rain. I remember standing in the hallway thinking he was joking. He wasn't joking. "$4,000 is gone from my safe," he said, "and you're the only one who could have taken it." I told him I never touched his safe. I told him I didn't even know the code. He laughed, that short, ugly laugh he had, and he said, "Save it. You've always been trouble." I looked past him into the living room, hoping my mother would say something. Anything. She sat on the couch and looked at the floor. She never said a word. That silence hurt more than anything Roger ever did to me. Because a stepfather can hate you, but a mother is supposed to fight for you. So I grabbed a garbage bag, threw in what clothes I could, and one more thing. A small wooden recipe box. It was the only thing I owned that mattered. Remember that box. It matters more than you can imagine right now. Roger saw me holding it and tried to snatch it. "That junk stays here," he said. I held on so hard my knuckles went white. For once, I didn't let go. Then the door shut behind me and I was standing on the lawn in the freezing rain, 17 years old. And here is the part nobody in that house knew. I knew exactly who took that $4,000. And it wasn't me. To explain, I have to tell you about my brother. My stepbrother, really. Marcus. Marcus was Roger's real son. The golden boy. The one who could do no wrong. I was the leftover. The son of the man my mother married before Roger. My real father died when I was 8. A heart attack, in the kitchen of his own little diner. Yeah, my dad was a cook. That wooden recipe box? Those were his recipes in his handwriting. After he died, my mother was scared and alone. 2 years later, she married Roger. And Roger made it very clear from day one that I was a guest in his house, not a son. Now, the night the money went missing, I was awake. I'd come downstairs for water, and through the kitchen doorway, I saw Marcus at the safe, counting cash into his backpack. He owed money to some older kids, bad money. He was terrified of them. He saw me see him, and we just stared at each other in the dark. The next morning, when Roger found the money gone, Marcus stood in the kitchen and pointed at me. "I saw Ethan near the safe last night," he said. "Calm as anything, looking right at me." And that was it. That was all it took. My mother believed him. Roger wanted to believe him. 8 years of my life, erased by one sentence from a boy saving his own skin. I could have screamed the truth. I did scream it. Nobody wanted to hear it. So I stopped screaming. And I made myself a quiet promise on that wet lawn. One day they would come looking for me, and I would be someone by then. I just had no idea how far down I'd have to go first. The first 3 nights I slept at a bus station until a guard moved me along. November in that city is no joke. The cold gets into your bones and it stays there. I was hungry in a way I'd never known. The kind of hunger that makes you dizzy. On the 4th night, I stood outside a small diner on Meredith Street, just to feel the warmth from the window. I wasn't going to beg. I still had that much pride left. Barely. Then the door opened, and an old man in an apron leaned out. Gray hair, thick glasses, flour on his hands. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I'll never forget.
"You've been standing there 20 minutes, son. A man that hungry should be eating, not watching."
His name was Sal. He owned the diner, and he sat me down in a corner booth and made me a plate of eggs. I ate like an animal. I'm not proud of it. He just watched quietly and refilled my coffee. When I finished, I told him I couldn't pay. I braced for him to throw me out. Instead, he said, "The sink's full of dishes in the back. You wash till closing, we're square. And there's more eggs." That was the first time in a week anyone had looked at me like I was a person. So I rolled up my sleeves and I washed dishes until midnight. And Sal, without either of us saying it out loud, gave me a reason to come back the next day. I want you to understand how close I came to not surviving that first winter, because it matters. Before Sal, there were 3 weeks I try not to think about. 3 weeks where I stopped being a person and became just cold and hungry and moving. I learned which dumpsters behind which restaurants got emptied when. I learned which church basements opened their doors on which nights. There was one night, the worst one, when it dropped below freezing and I couldn't feel my feet. I sat down against a brick wall behind a gas station, and I remember thinking it would be easier to just stop, to close my eyes and let the cold do what it wanted. I was 17 and I was ready to quit. And then I thought about my father, about the recipe box in my bag, about the one thing nobody could take from me. I opened the box right there in the cold, and I read his handwriting by a streetlight until my hands were too numb to hold it. And I decided I was not going to die behind a gas station. Not with his recipes unread. Not like that. I got up. I kept moving. And 4 nights later, I was standing outside Sal's window. Sometimes survival is just refusing to sit down one more time. That's all it was for me. I started showing up every morning at 6. Washing, sweeping, taking out the trash. Sal never asked where I slept. For a while, the answer was the storeroom. On a cot he pretended not to notice. One night I asked him why he'd helped a stranger off the street. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, "I had a son once, about your age when I lost him. His boy had run off after a fight years ago. Sal never saw him again. I keep this diner open," he said, "so that if he ever comes back, there's a light on." That broke something open in me. 2 people the world had thrown away, sharing a plate of eggs. The diner wasn't doing well. I could see it in the empty booths and the stack of unpaid bills by the register. So I decided I wasn't just going to wash dishes. I was going to save this place. One slow afternoon, I brought in my father's wooden recipe box, the one I'd saved from that garbage bag. I asked Sal if I could cook one of my dad's dishes for the Friday special. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Show me." My hands shook. I hadn't cooked that recipe since I was a kid watching my father. It was a slow-braised short rib with a coffee and brown sugar glaze, my dad's signature. Sal took one bite. He put his fork down, and for a second his eyes went wet.
"Where did you learn this?"
I told him about my father, the diner, the heart attack in the kitchen, and Sal got very still. Then he said the thing that changed my whole life.
"I knew a cook named Cole years back. Little place across the river. Best short rib in the city."
My father. Sal had eaten at my father's diner 20 years before he ever found me freezing outside his own. Some things in this life are not accidents. I'm sure of that now. We put my dad's short rib on the menu that Friday. We sold out by 7 o'clock. The next Friday, there was a line out the door. Now, not everything went smoothly just because we found a good recipe. Let me tell you about the Tuesday that almost ended us. 2 months after the short rib took off, a man in a gray suit walked in during the lunch rush and flashed a badge. City Health Inspector. Sal went pale. The diner was old. The walk-in cooler was older. One bad report and they could shut us down for good. The inspector poked at everything. The wiring, the drains, the temperature logs I'd only just started keeping. And here's the part that stung. He looked at me, this skinny kid in a stained apron, and he smirked. Place like this won't last the year, he said. That smirk. I'd seen it before, on Roger's face. I decided right there I would prove it wrong. For 3 weeks, I barely slept. I scrubbed that kitchen until it shined. I rebuilt the temperature system myself, watching videos on a library computer. When the inspector came back, he walked the whole place twice. He didn't say a word for 10 minutes. Then he signed the top rating, handed it to me and said, "I was wrong about you, kid." And he left. Sal framed that certificate and hung it by the register. He said it was the first time he'd ever seen someone turn a smirk into fuel. That lesson never left me. Every person who ever looked down on me, I turned into a reason to keep going. For 2 years, that little diner came back to life. New menu, my father's recipes, Sal at the register telling stories. I finally had a home, a real one, built out of dishes and second chances. Then one morning, Sal didn't come in. That had never happened. Not once. I found him at his apartment on the floor. I called an ambulance with my hands shaking. It was cancer. The kind that had been growing quietly while he poured my coffee and called me son. The doctors gave him months. He took the news like he took everything, quietly with a small nod. I moved him into my storeroom cot and slept on the floor beside him so he wouldn't be alone. The way he once made sure I wasn't alone outside that window years before. In his last weeks, we talked every night. He asked me once if I'd ever forgive my family. I told him no. Never. He just smiled and said, "Give it time, son. Anger is a heavy thing to carry in an apron." Sal passed away on a Sunday morning, with the smell of coffee in the air and my hand in his. He was the closest thing to a father I'd had since I was 8 years old. Those last few weeks with Sal were the hardest and, strangely, the most beautiful of my life. I closed the diner early most nights and just sat with him. He'd drift in and out, but when he was awake, he talked. He told me things he'd never told anyone. He told me about his son again. His name was Michael. They'd fought over something so small, Sal couldn't even remember it anymore. "Don't do what I did, Ethan," he said. "Don't let a small thing become a forever thing. Life is too short to keep score." I asked him if he was scared. He thought about it a long time. Then he smiled and said, "No, I got to be somebody's father again before the end. That's more than most men get." That broke me, because he meant me. This old man who owed me nothing called me his second chance at being a father. One night, near the end, he took my hand and made me promise 2 things. I've kept both of them every single day since. "Promise me you'll never turn a hungry person away from your door," he said. "And promise me you'll find your family one day, not for them, for you, so the anger doesn't eat you alive." I promised. I didn't understand the second one then. I do now. Sal knew something about carrying anger that I was too young to know. He died 3 days later, peaceful, in the morning, with the smell of coffee I'd made drifting in from the front. After the funeral, a lawyer called and asked me to come to his office. I assumed it was a formality, paperwork. I was wrong. Sal had left a will, and I was in it. I thought maybe he'd left me the diner. That alone would have been more than I ever dreamed. But Sal hadn't just owned the diner. He owned the entire building, and the 2 next to it. The quiet old man in the flower-covered apron had been buying property on that street for 40 years. He never spent a dollar on himself. He drove a rusted truck and ate his own diner food. He left all of it to me, a boy he found starving outside his window. There was a letter with the will. 3 lines in his shaky handwriting. I still have it in my wallet.
Ethan, keep a light on for the ones the world throws away. And put your father's short rib on every menu. Sal.
I sat in that lawyer's office and cried like the 17-year-old on the lawn all over again. Not because of the money, because someone had finally chosen me. Building Kohl's was not a straight line up. About a year in, I made a mistake that nearly cost me everything Sal left me. I brought on a business partner, a charming, sharp man named Victor who said he could handle the money side while I cooked. For a while it worked. Then I started noticing the numbers didn't add up. supplier invoices that didn't match what we received. Victor was skimming. Slowly, quietly, the same way Marcus once emptied a safe. Some thieves you meet more than once in a life. The old me, the 17-year-old, would have screamed and swung. But Sal had taught me something better than anger. Patience. So I said nothing. I quietly gathered every invoice, every bank record for 2 months. I built a case. Then I sat Victor down with a folder 3 inches thick and offered him a choice. Sign over your shares and walk away tonight, or talk to the police in the morning. He signed. He was gone by midnight, and I learned to keep the books myself from that day forward. I keep every receipt now, every record, because I learned young that the truth, written down and saved, is the only weapon that never lies. Hold on to that, because the habit of keeping proof is going to matter enormously before this story ends. 3 years went by. Kohl's grew. I hired more people, opened a second location across town, started Meredith Capital to fund small restaurants run by people like me. And in all that time, I never once went looking for my family. I told myself I didn't care. I was lying, of course. Because there was one night about a year before all this that I've never told anyone about. Until now. A young man came into Kohl's alone, late, and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. He looked thin, tired, familiar. I stood in the kitchen doorway and stared at him for a long moment. Something in my chest turned over. But the dining room was dark, and it had been 6 years, and I told myself I was imagining things. I sent him a free dessert and never went out to look closer. I found out much later that it had been Marcus. He'd wandered in not knowing it was mine, and left before I placed the face. 2 brothers, in the same room, 6 years after everything, and neither of us knew. Life is strange that way. I think about that night a lot. How close the truth came and how it just passed us by in the dark. It wouldn't wait forever, though. I could have sold it all and disappeared onto a beach somewhere. I didn't. I kept my promise, and I kept his. I took the little diner and I built it into a real restaurant. I named it Kohl's, after my father. His recipes were the whole menu. His short rib was the star. It took 3 years of 18-hour days. I slept in the office more nights than I'll admit. But Kohl's became the place in that city. 6-week waiting list. A review in the paper calling it a love letter to a father. I hired people the world had given up on. Ex-cons, runaways, kids sleeping in bus stations. Because an old man once looked at a starving boy through a window and saw something worth saving. I was 24, and for the first time in my life I had everything. Except answers. Because I still didn't know what had happened to the family that threw me away. I was about to find out, and it was going to walk right through my own front door. I want to tell you about the night Kohl's opened because it's the happiest I've ever been, and it explains everything that came after. It took 8 months to turn Sal's tired little diner into a real restaurant. I kept his corner booth exactly where it was. I never touched it. On opening night, before the doors opened, I stood alone in the empty dining room. I set 1 table for 2, 1 plate for me, 1 for Sal. I cooked my father's short rib and I put a plate in front of an empty chair, and I said thank you out loud to a man who wasn't there anymore. Thank you to Sal for the eggs. Thank you to my father for the recipes. Thank you to a 17-year-old who refused to sit down and die behind a gas station. Then I opened the doors, and the line went all the way down Meredith Street, past the very window I'd once stood outside, freezing and starving. I hired a busboy that first month who was sleeping in a shelter, a line cook who'd just gotten out of prison, a dishwasher who was 16 and scared, exactly like I had been. Every one of them I looked at through Sal's eyes. Not what can this person do for me, but what has the world failed to see? That's the restaurant those 4 people walked into on a Thursday night. A house built entirely out of second chances. Remember that when you hear what I chose to do. It was a Thursday evening. We were fully booked like always. I was in the back tasting sauces. My floor manager, Priya, came in holding the reservation book with a strange look on her face. "There's a private dinner tonight," she said. "A businessman trying to impress an investor. Party of 4. The name on the booking is Roger Hale," she said. I put down my spoon. The whole kitchen seemed to go quiet, though nobody else had heard anything. Roger Hale, my stepfather. The man who threw me into the rain 8 years ago. Here is what I would learn later, piece by piece, over the course of that unbelievable night. Roger's business had collapsed 2 years earlier. He'd borrowed against the house and lost it. They'd been renting a small apartment ever since. Marcus had dropped out. My mother had taken a job at a checkout counter. And now Roger was making one last, desperate play. He'd found an investor willing to fund a new venture. What Roger did not know, could not possibly know, was who actually owned that investment fund. The fund was called Meredith Capital. I'd named it after Meredith Street, after Sal's Diner. The investor Roger was so desperate to impress tonight was me. He had booked a table at his own stepson's restaurant to beg his own stepson's company for money. And none of them had any idea. I could have refused the table. I could have had them turned away at the door and never faced them at all. For 8 years, I had dreamed of this exact moment. And now that it was here, I didn't know what I felt. I decided I would let them have their dinner. I would watch from the kitchen, and I would decide later. They arrived at 8. I watched through the little window in the kitchen door. Roger looked older, smaller. His suit was expensive but a little too big, like he'd bought it in a better year. Marcus followed behind him, thin and tired, staring at his own shoes. And then my mother walked in. Older, grayer. Her hands were rough now from work. Something in my chest folded in half when I saw her. I hate that it did. But it did. For an hour, I let them eat. I sent out my best dishes, my father's short rib, on the house. Roger bragged the whole time about the deal he was about to close. The investor who was going to save him. Finally, Priya came to me and said, "The investor's representative is supposed to arrive now. What do I tell them?" I took off my apron. I straightened my jacket, and I said, "Tell them the owner will be joining them personally." Then I walked out of my kitchen and across my dining room toward the table that held my entire past. Marcus saw me first. His fork froze in the air. His face went white as paper. Roger looked up, annoyed at the interruption, not recognizing me at all. And my mother knew me instantly. A mother always knows. She stood up so fast her chair fell over, and she pointed at me and screamed,
"That's him. That's the boy who abandoned this family."
And there it was. The scene from the very beginning of this story. Now you're caught up. The whole room went silent. 100 strangers watching, and I just stood there, looking at my mother. Roger grabbed my mother's arm and hissed, "Linda, sit down. You're embarrassing me in front of my investor." And I said quietly, "I am your investor, Roger." You could have heard a pin drop. Roger's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "This is my restaurant," I said. "That fund you've been chasing for 3 months, I built it. It's mine." Roger's face went through about 5 colors. Confusion, recognition, fear, and then, worst of all, shame. "Ethan," he finally choked out, you own—" "The last time we spoke," I said, "you called me trash and put me out in the rain. Do you remember?" Roger did the thing cowards always do when they're cornered. He tried to smile and pretend we were family. "Son, come on, that was a misunderstanding. You know how heated things got." "A misunderstanding," that repeated. "You accused me of stealing $4,000. I've spent 8 years wondering if any of you ever found out the truth. So let's find out right now, together." And I turned, slowly, and I looked at Marcus, the golden boy, who had gone completely still in his chair. "Marcus," I said, "you want to tell them, or should I?" Marcus looked at me, and something in his face just crumbled. 8 years is a long time to carry a lie. "I took the money," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. Roger turned to him. "What did you say?" "I took it, Dad," Marcus said, louder now, tears starting. I owed Danny Vaughn $4 grand and I was scared. I took it from the safe, and I let you blame Ethan. The whole table went silent. My mother slowly sat back down, staring at Marcus like she'd never seen him before. For 8 years, Marcus said, looking at me, I told myself you were fine, that it didn't matter, because if it mattered, then I was a monster. And you're standing here owning all this, he said, and I've got nothing, and I deserve nothing. God, I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'm not gonna lie to you. Watching Marcus finally break was not as satisfying as I'd imagined for 8 years. It just made me tired and sad. For the boy I used to share a bathroom with. I want to pause here and tell you what that room felt like, because I'll never forget it as long as I live. 100 strangers had come out for a nice dinner, anniversaries, birthdays, first dates, and instead they were watching a family come apart at the seams. Nobody ate. Nobody spoke. A waiter stood frozen by table 9 with a tray of drinks he'd forgotten he was holding. And in the middle of it all was me, the dishwasher, the runaway, the boy they'd thrown away, standing in a tailored jacket in a restaurant with my dead father's name on the wall. Part of me wanted to enjoy it, to let the whole room see these people humbled. I'm being honest with you because this story only works if I'm honest. But another part of me, the part Sal built, just felt hollow. Winning didn't feel like I thought it would. My mother was crying now. Roger was staring at the tablecloth like it might save him, and Marcus couldn't look at anyone. I realized in that moment that I had all the power in the room. And that is exactly the moment a person shows who they really are. So I took a breath, and instead of destroying them, I decided to ask for the truth first. The whole truth, starting with the woman who raised me. But it was my mother I was really waiting on, and she still hadn't said a word since she'd sat back down. So I looked at her and I asked the question I'd carried for 8 years. You're my mother, I said. Why didn't you fight for me? Just tell me that. Why did you stay silent? And my mother did something I did not expect. She didn't make an excuse.
Because I was a coward. Because I was scared of Roger. Because I told myself a child would land on his feet and a marriage was harder to replace.
And every single day since, I have hated myself for it. I looked for you, Ethan. 2 years ago, I found your restaurant online.
That stopped me cold. You knew, I said. You knew this was mine? Tonight?
I knew. When Roger said the restaurant's name, I knew. I begged him to cancel. He wouldn't listen.
I came tonight, she said, not for his stupid deal. I came because it was the only way I could think of to see your face again. And then she reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out something small and worn. It was a photograph. Me at 7 years old, standing on a stool next to my father in his diner kitchen. I kept it all these years, she said. It's the only picture of you and your dad I have left. I wanted you to have it. I stood there holding that photograph. My father, flour on his hands, laughing. Me, tiny, so proud to be beside him. And I thought about Sal, about the light he kept on for a son who might come home. I thought about what Sal told me, dying in that storeroom. Anger is a heavy thing to carry in an apron. For 8 years, I had planned a revenge. A cold, perfect, public revenge. I had it right in front of me. I could destroy Roger with one sentence. I could have him thrown out into a night as cold as the one he gave me. And every part of my 17-year-old self was screaming at me to do it. But I looked around my restaurant, at the staff I'd hired, the runaways, the second chance kids, at the name on the wall, Coles, and I realized revenge would make me the smaller man. It would make me Roger. So I made a different choice. The hardest choice I have ever made. I looked at Roger and I said, your deal is dead. Meredith Capital will never fund you. That part you earned. Then I turned to Marcus. But you, I said, you told the truth tonight, finally. That took something. My dish pit is short a man, I said. It's hard work. Minimum wage to start. You show up at 6, you work, you keep your head down, same as I did. That's the only thing I'm offering anyone at this table. A job. and a chance to become someone better than you were tonight. Marcus put his face in his hands and wept. And this time, they were not the tears of a boy saving his own skin. My mother asked if she could see me again, just for coffee, just to talk. I told her the truth, that I didn't know yet, that 8 years of silence doesn't heal in one dinner. But I gave her back the photograph. No, I made a copy and I kept the original. And I told her I'd call. Because forgiveness isn't a door you open all at once. Sometimes it's a light you leave on, just in case. Roger left without another word. I never took a cent from him, and I never gave him one. Some men you just let walk away. Marcus showed up the next morning at 6. He's still washing dishes at Kohl's today. He hasn't missed a day. I don't know if he'll become a better man, but I gave him the same window Sal once gave me. The rest is up to him. Sometimes I stand in my dining room at closing after everyone's gone, and I look at my father's name on the wall. And I think about a scared 17-year-old on a wet lawn, holding a wooden box, making a promise. He kept it. Not the way he planned, but he kept it. So now I'll ask you what I promised at the start. After everything you just heard, who was the real thief in this family? The boy blamed for $4,000? Or the people who stole 8 years of his life? Tell me in the comments. I read every one, and I promise you, I'll reply to the ones who stayed till the end. My name is Ethan Cole. That old man kept a light on for me. Now I keep one on for everyone else. Thank you for listening. Don't forget which light you leave on tonight.